It can't be understated how influential Type Moon was and is to doujin circles. They've inspired a ton of fan-created works, including fan art, cosplay, and fan games, many of which we've looked at on Weird Fighting Games. This Weird Fighting Game is no different. In fact, it's a lot like Glove on Fight, because without the Tsukihime characters, I would have never played Artemis Blade. Welcome to Weird Fighting Games in Type Moon June. Artemis Blade has to be the most elusive game I've ever covered because there is next to no information about this game I can find on the internet. There are very few videos about this game and little to no website coverage. The best you'll get is this game's Internet Archive page where you can download it for free due to it being abandonware. The game's developer is Digital Hawk, and just like their game, they're just as elusive, if not more. Released at Comiket 65 in late December of 2003, Artemis Blade is a 1v1 doujin fighter featuring characters from various popular visual novels. Apparently, this was their first and last game. Artemis Blade was sold for around 3,000 yen, which adjusted for 2024 inflation comes out to 3,409 yen, which equates to $21.68 USD. That doesn't break the bank, but for $20, I've got some expectations. I mean, some of the best games I've played, I've gotten for around 20 bucks, if not less. I think that's enough preface already. Actually, that might be all the preface there ever was. So I'll stop beating around the bush. Let's play some Artemis Blade. Oh. Episode 12. Artemis Blade. What better place to start than the title screen? Artemis Blade doesn't have an intro. It just drops you straight in. That's not a deal breaker, but I can't help but be disappointed. Intro videos can set the tone for the game you're about to play and can be really memorable. That's why I like including them in these videos, but they're not necessary and not every game necessarily needs one. Something a fighting game definitely needs is a character select screen, and as an expert on fighting game character select screens, I can say with authority that this is a character select screen. You have eyes, you can see what's wrong here. Simply slapping your character sprites in a black void just feels wrong. You might have noticed this extra empty slot, and I'll spoil it for you. There are no unlockable characters or super secret boss fights, unfortunately. This feels like a work in progress, but no, this is what you get when you boot up Artemis Blade. The one thing I can give this character select screen credit for is they let you know what franchise each character is from, but that's about all you'll get from this game, as it doesn't have a victory screen or arcade mode endings. Still, having the decency to list the franchise the characters are from is a big positive. Glove on Fight didn't do this, so if there's one thing Artemis Blade has over Glove on Fight, it would be this. Although I imagine if you were around in the community at the time, you'd already know who these characters are, but I don't think that's an excuse. You should always account for the possibility that this game will be someone's first exposure to these characters. The art style of Artemis Blade is very cutesy, but it doesn't do anything interesting with its style. The animations are very stilted, almost like each character is a puppet and the player is the marionette. They lack any impact, none of the attacks feel satisfying to land. Add on to the fact that the characters barely emote and victory animations are barely animated, and you're left with a game that can be unintentionally unnerving at times. What I'm trying to say is, Mortal Kombat 1 has some real competition. At first glance, you might assume the game feels rough to play, like a Flash game from the same time period, but the most baffling thing about this game is it's not as bad as it looks. That doesn't mean that it's perfect or good, but I can tell that the programmer on Artemis Blade did understand fighting games to a certain extent, with a major emphasis on that last part because there are these small aspects that are just off. For example, when waking up from a knockdown, the player can't attack just like any other fighter. But in Artemis Blade, it takes a tad too long to be able to attack again, and the invincibility lasts a little bit longer than you'd expect based off the animation, making the act of getting up a chore. Especially with a certain character. Artemis Blade is chock full of weird little quirks like this. Like the character select screen, Artemis Blade's gameplay is the bare minimum. There are 3 attack buttons, light, medium, and heavy. Like Guilty Gear or Marvel vs. Capcom, the buttons can be chained into each other from the weakest to strongest. Light attacks are fast, quick, and can be chained multiple times. They can even be used as anti-airs due to their speed. Actually, this game doesn't even have anti-airs, so these are your best bet. Medium attacks act as combo filler, and crouching mediums act as another low attack. Heavy attacks are highly committal. Some are simple attacks that can act as combo enders, but they can also be overheads or sweeps. Characters have 1 to 2 command normals. It's a lot like the King of Fighters because the command normals can be comboed into and special cancelled out of. Special moves work like you'd expect, but if you expected characters to have more than 2 at most, then I've got some bad news. Other than the above mentioned features, characters in Artemis Blade can double jump, air block, throw, and that's it. No super attacks, no meter whatsoever, no extra system mechanics to sink your teeth into. It's just plain and simple fighting. On paper, that's not a bad thing. 2 of the best-selling fighting games of all time, Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat 2, don't have any fancy bells and whistles, and yet are beloved by many. Artemis Blade, however, lacks even the most basic elements those games had, like good animations, unique special moves, and most importantly, interesting characters. A standard combo in Artemis Blade goes something like this. 3 to 4 light attacks, a medium, a command normal, and then a special move. This will net you the most damage possible and score a knockdown. You always want to end in specials over heavy attacks for 2 reasons. First of all, not all heavies can be comboed into, and second of all, they can't be cancelled into special moves, kneecapping your damage output if you end a combo in one. Since special moves serve virtually the same function at the end of a combo, granting the same hard knockdown heavy attacks do, heavy attacks are useless in combos unless your character doesn't have a good special ender. Usually, developers avoid problems like this by making weaker attacks scale combo damage harsher than the slower buttons. That's why Ryu doing a combo with crouching hard punch into Shoryuken does more damage than standing light kick in the Shoryuken. Mechanics like this are one of the key features you'll see in every fighting game from Street Fighter to Soul Calibur, but as far as I can tell, the scaling either does not exist in Artemis Blade or is just implemented really poorly. It makes the already limited movesets feel even worse because every character does the same combos, the only difference being in the animations. We've covered almost everything that Artemis Blade has to offer. The last thing to talk about would be the characters, and the characters in Artemis Blade are painfully simple for a fighting game. Au from Kaonon, who was also in the last episode, coincidentally enough, I didn't plan this by the way, has to be the worst of the bunch. Her heavy attacks are a really slow dive and slide respectively, and her 2 special moves are a simple launcher and this flying back attack. Unlike every other character, her specials are on forward inputs, making them awkward to use. Her heavy command normal serves as an alternative heavy attack that knocks down like the other characters, but you'd never want to do this. You always want to combo into the flying back attack. Misuzu is from the visual novel creatively titled air, she fares much better. She is the only character in the game with a Dragon Punch-like special move. Combine this with her Flying Knee launcher, and she has some very consistent, high damage juggle combos in the corner. She also has this Whirlwind Punch attack that might look underwhelming, but don't underestimate this move. It has great pushback, is spammable, and if you land the heavy version raw, it does as much as a B&B. Akane is from the visual novel 1 Kagayaku Kesetsu. She's this game's only zoner. She doesn't have any projectiles or anything like that, but she does have this nifty umbrella that allows her to attack from a slightly longer range than the rest of the cast. She only has one special move, a launcher that's only useful in the corner, so you're actually better off canceling into her 2-hit umbrella command normal. Her stage is the first one you'll see if you jump right into Artemis Blade's arcade mode, and it gives a terrible first impression, if the character select screen didn't already serve as a bad omen. None of the stages are animated, which is fine, but if you're gonna go with static stages, why make one of them have rain in it? It just makes things look cheap and like I'm fighting on top of a PNG. I mean, I am fighting on top of a PNG. If you go into the game directory folder, they're literal PNGs, but you know what I mean. Then we've got Satsuki and Arcoade from the hit anime, Lunar Legend, Tsukihime. These are the two characters I look forward to playing the most, and they certainly did disappoint. Let's start with Satsuki. She is mostly a clone of Misuzu, but without her specials. No, Satsuki gets this totally on-brand punch attack that I assure you is in fact a special move and not just a normal attack. Her most unique trait is her most detrimental. When you knock Satsuki down, she has this special get-up animation. This is a direct reference to this CG from Tsukihime. Cool, right? It was the first time, but after the 27th time, it just got on my nerves. Not only does it waste my time, but it allows the opponent to push you towards the corner. Great game design there. Does Arcoade fare any better? Not really, she's just really generic. She has the same punch move as Satsuki, and that's it. The most interesting thing about her is her throw animation, which is another sick reference. For some reason, she's got these Wizard of Oz ruby stilettos on, which I'm 90% sure she's never worn, ever. So I guess that was a little bit of a creative liberty from Digital Hawk. I'm not familiar with the other non-Tsukihime characters, but I'm just going to assume that out of all of them, Arcoade's power set would make the most interesting fighting game moveset, and she's just left with the most boring one. Other than that, the Tsukihime stages are references to these backgrounds. The music for said stages are remixes of track 4 and track 6 from Tsukihime, which are some of the spookier, tense tracks, but work surprisingly well as fighting game tracks. Here, take a listen. Seeing how simple Satsuki and Arc are, I wouldn't be surprised if they were late additions to Artemis Blade just to drive sales. They've got very basic movesets, and they're the only series with 2 representatives, so I don't think my theory is too far-fetched, if not a tad bit cynical. Cool characters can really help a fighting game stand out, but when you're left with bland characters with recycled movesets, the game has to fall back on the system mechanics. As we've discussed, the system mechanics of Artemis Blade are non-existent, so you're just left with something truly boring and uninspired. I went into Artemis Blade with no expectations and still came out disappointed. The presentation is non-existent, with lifeless, doll-like characters, static stages, and the most generic animations I've ever seen in a fighting game. The characters are uninspired and show a severe lack of creativity, especially considering what we've seen other developers can do with the very same characters. The fan service is equally as basic and lifeless. A crossover fighter should be a big deal with a lot of energy, but Artemis Blade couldn't be any further in the other direction. The game simply lacks content and needs more polish, but I can't imagine this is the game Digital Hawk had in their heads when they set out to create Artemis Blade. Something must have gone wrong during development, or maybe the team was just in over their heads. Games are hard to make, fighting games doubly so, and Artemis Blade is living proof. Although, at the very least, the game functions, and I didn't run into any game-breaking bugs, which should count for something. But when you're charging money, that sentiment dissipates fast. Despite the fact I didn't pay for this back in 2003, I can't help but imagine how people who did felt. I can say confidently, as of this episode, this is the worst fighting game we've looked at on this series, bar none. In Japanese, they have a word for bad games, and if you've been around anime fighters long enough, you should be familiar with it. Kusoge, an unenjoyable or poorly made video game. Artemis Blade fits that description like a glove, but over here in America on this YouTube channel, we call games like Artemis Blade weird fighting games, and some weird fighting games are better left to the depths of the internet. Next time on Type Moon, June, it's another character spotlight. We'll be looking at one of Tsukihime's most enigmatic side characters. Feel free to guess who they are in the comments. I'll even give you a shout out if you get it right. The only clue I'll give is that this character, unlike Shiki, is in Melty and is not a main character in any route. Until next time, thanks for watching and have a happy Type Moon June.